Hi, I'm Andy Jones, content editor for Plaid's online education program, Let's Paint. Welcome to Color Lessons. Today we're painting a floral design titled Tuscan Sunshine.
For all of our color lessons, I'm using FolkArt's Pure Artist Pigment paint. It's been specially formulated to be very, very thick so that you can use this for a wide range of painting techniques. We can use it thinned down for transparent watercolor effects, or you can use it with a palette knife for really thick, rich impasto work. The 20 colors of FolkArt Pure Artist Pigments are available at plaidonline.com/Let's Paint. And in the set, there is also a great color theory worksheet that is specially coded for you to paint on and reuse if you'd like to. And this is included in the kit with the 20 colors. So this is a great color theory booklet, and we also support this with an online video. I'm also using the FolkArt Pure Artist Pigment Mixing Mat, and this is a great tool to use in place of a palette. It's a reusable silicone mat, and it has spaces to put your colors out around the edge of the palette. Part of it is gray so that you can see exactly what value of colors that you're using. Part of it's white so that you can see how transparent a color is. It also has a quick guide for color harmonies as well as a little vocabulary list so that you can keep yourself familiar with color theory terms. This is a great product, and I think you'll really enjoy using it, and you can use it over and over and over. It cleans off beautifully and does not stain. For all the color lessons, I'm using the FolkArt Select Firm Bristle Brush. These brushes have been designed with a firm bristle synthetic filament, and it is great for canvas painting. It will stand up to lots of abuse. With care and cleaning, these brushes will last you a long, long time. They're perfect for canvas painting as well as any other kind of fabric painting that you're going to do. I think you're really going to love these FolkArt Select Firm Bristle brushes. They're available at plaidonline.com/Let's Paint in a package of 7 beautiful brushes. Some of you are concerned that you can't draw. Well, we've got you covered because we're teaching you how to paint, not how to draw. The color lessons come with a package of full color photographs so that you have a complete set of all of the photographs for all of your color lessons paintings. In addition to that, we have full-size pattern sheets. So they're printed out for you so you don't have to enlarge anything, and you can transfer the designs directly to your canvas. So these also are available at plaidonline.com/Let's Paint.
We're going to begin our painting of Tuscan Sunset by setting up our palette with the following colors. We need FolkArt Pure Artist Pigment Yellow Ochre, Titanium White, Dioxazine Purple, Prussian Blue, Sap Green, and Yellow Light. We'll be adding some other colors later on, but these will get us started. I'm also adding some FolkArt Floating Medium to a portion cup that I have on my palette. So I just add some of that in there, and I like putting it in a little cup so that it's always handy for me to reach and I don't have to wonder where it might be on my palette. I'm going to mix a nice putty color by combining titanium white, and I want you to get into this habit of always wiping your palette knife on a shop towel. Fold your shop towel over, pull your palette knife out, and it's clean. Always do that every time you stop using your palette knife before you go and pick up paint so that you don't contaminate any of the puddles of paint on your palette. So I'm going to add some yellow ochre to my titanium white. The rule of thumb is to always add your darker color to your lighter color when you're mixing. That way you don't use as much. If I tried to lighten a puddle of yellow ochre with white, I would end up with a mountain of paint. All right, so I've got a nice enough color here. It's pretty light, and that's going to be fine for what we're doing, this light background, but I want to tone that color down just a little bit, so I'm going to add a small amount of dioxazine purple to this, and the purple and the yellow ochre will combine to dull this color just a little bit, and it will be a little bit softer color for our background. We don't want this color competing with our yellow flowers. Be sure to mix your paint by mashing it and pushing it back into a puddle. You will do a better job mixing your paint by this method rather than just trying to stir the paint. Stirring the paint is not going to mix it well enough for you. I want to add a little bit more dioxazine purple to this, and not much, just a little bit to tone this color more. I don't want to turn it purple, but I don't want it to be a nice gold color. I want it to be more of a putty tone. And this is going to be good enough to get us started. And we will be doing some brush mixing as well. So I have a putty color. I'm also going to mix aqua. So I'm going to move some titanium white to a clean spot on my palette. And I'm going to add Prussian blue to this. And it's not going to take much Prussian blue because that Prussian blue is a very, very intense, strong color, and it will tint this puddle of white very, very quickly. And we'll be coming back to our aqua throughout this painting, so make sure to mix a nice sized puddle of it. Going to add just a little bit more Prussian blue to this. I can always lighten my mixture by brush mixing some white if I want to create some various tints of this aqua. And now I'm going to add a very small amount of yellow light to make this a bit more greenish. I'm going to need more of the yellow light. I can tell that already. It did not alter the color enough to suit me. And each time you do a painting where you're mixing your own colors, you will create some variation in it. So no two paintings will ever be exactly alike, and I think that's a great thing. And also by mixing your colors, you make the painting your own. Some people will want this aqua color to be more green. Some people will want it to be more blue. And either way you make your aqua is perfectly fine. So just continue to clean your palette knife as you make these mixtures and move from one color to another. I'm going to make one other mixture before we begin putting paint on our canvas, and I'm going to start with some titanium white, and I'm going to add a little bit of dioxazine purple to this and create a nice light violet color. And then I'm going to dull this violet color by adding some yellow ochre to it. So it's actually the opposite of the first color mixture that we made. We just don't want our background colors to be too vivid. We want them more muted so that they rest in the background. So that's why we're adding the complementary colors to tone them down. All right, so we have some mixtures of paint and we're ready to start applying paint to our canvas. I'm going to use a large 1-inch flat brush, and I'm using the FolkArt Select Firm Bristle brushes for this. And I'm going to start by picking up some titanium white. First, I'm going to pick up some FolkArt Floating Medium and dress my brush by working the FolkArt Floating Medium into the bristles. This will help the paint move on the canvas a little more easily. And I'm going to load my brush with some titanium white, and we're going to begin to establish the yellow part of our background. So on our canvas, I'm going to begin to apply this using vertical strokes, and I'm going to move some of this into my design. I transferred my design onto my canvas using gray artist transfer paper, and the design is available in the FolkArt Color Lessons kit that is available at plaidonline.com, so you don't actually have to know how to draw to create a beautiful painting. But I'm applying some white to the canvas in a few areas to establish a bit of a light area in the background, and then I'm going to shift to my putty color and pick up a little bit of yellow ochre just to make it slightly more yellow. And up here in the top, we're going to put this on, and if I need to, I can add some more floating medium to my brush and just make this paint go on the canvas a little bit easier and a little bit faster. The Pure Artist pigments are very, very thick and heavy-bodied, and sometimes just applying them directly to the canvas takes a little more effort than I want to put in. So adding some FolkArt floating medium just makes the paint slide on the canvas a little bit more. So again, applying this color using vertical strokes, and then where the putty color meets the yellow ochre, we just continue with the vertical strokes, moving some of this color inside the design lines. Where the putty color meets the titanium white, we're just going to blend that using vertical strokes, and it's perfectly fine to have some of the brush strokes showing. Doesn't bother me at all. Lets everyone know that this is in fact painted by hand. And carrying this dirty putty color down, you get to blend and create various tones of the putty color in your background, and that's exactly what we're looking for. While you're painting your design on the canvas, don't concern yourselves with painting the outside edge of the gallery wrap canvas. You can come back and do that after your painting is finished. I actually painted mine a aqua color, so don't try to do that while you're painting the actual design. So I'm just continuing to apply some of this darker putty color and bringing it into my design so that I don't have gaps. When I go to paint my big sunflowers, I don't want to have to worry about filling in a gap where I left it blank. So picking up my darker putty color and FolkArt floating medium as needed, just to help move this paint on the background. Now I'm adding some titanium white to this, and I can blend these colors together. Having brush marks showing is not a problem. Now I'm going to introduce a little bit of my aqua here on the right-hand side of the canvas, just above the sunflowers here. So I picked some of the aqua up. I didn't clean my brush or wipe it off on my palette. I just picked up some FolkArt floating medium and the aqua, and now we're just applying that again with long vertical strokes, and we're moving that up and letting it merge and blend into the putty color. And that's just creating a nice transition here. You can pick up some more of the aqua if I want that color to be a little stronger, and just reapply that again using long light strokes and blending it into the putty color. Don't get too hung up on this background. Every background is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to make the painting unique. So we're just getting some color in the background just to help establish the overall tone of the painting. I'm going to come over here and go the opposite direction and apply some of this aqua above the aqua stripe in the final painting. Again, using vertical strokes. This time we're just stroking the opposite direction, and I can turn around or turn my brush around and come back and soften these in. I don't mind seeing the brush marks. I think that's kind of attractive there. And I'm going to pick up some of the purple color and some floating medium on my brush now. Again, not stopping to clean my brush out. And I'm going to fill in this area under the handle next to the jug. As long as I can still see my design, I'm perfectly fine with covering up those transfer lines. And then we're going to continue this color outside the handle and down to what's going to be our aqua stripe. And just, again, using the vertical strokes, I'm moving the purple into the aqua and some of the aqua back into the purple color. And you get this really nice transition, and having those brush marks in there, again, is perfectly acceptable and I think very, very lovely. I'm going to carry this purple color across the canvas, and on this side of the jug, I'm going to apply it underneath the handle. And then in this area, to the right of the jug's handle and above the aqua stripe on the final painting. Put that on there, and then begin to blend the purple into the aqua. If for some reason your paint isn't moving the way you want it to, you may wipe your brush off on a shop towel. Always pinch it between the towel, grooming the brush to a nice chisel edge, and then just pick up a little bit of floating medium, work it into the bristles of your brush, and come back, and you can soften that color very easily just by adding a little bit of the floating medium. It just makes it slick again and very easy to brush that color out. All right, I have just about added color everywhere I need to, except I've got a little bit of a gap in this area, so I'm going to pick up some of my putty color. I'm going to brush some of that on, and then pick up some titanium white for variety, and again apply it using vertical strokes, and just softening this in, trying to fill in our background area so that we don't have any gaps. I'm going to soften this by wiping my brush off, picking up a little FolkArt floating medium on my brush, and then just come in here and soften that little transition area. And now we have a nicely modeled background that's going to set the stage for our bright sunflowers. That is about the upper third of the canvas. I'm not going to paint the aqua area just yet, nor am I going to paint the red big swath that runs through here. But let's go ahead and establish this foreground area. And I'm going to do that by picking up the aqua mixture on my brush and easing it on with a little extra floating medium. And we'll apply that over here underneath our red swath. If you're running out of paint, go ahead and pick up some more on your brush. Don't work too hard applying this. It's easier to add some more paint and floating medium to your brush than it is to work really hard to kind of stretch the paint out. There are times when I think stretching the paint out is the way to go, but right now we're going to put plenty of paint on our canvas so that we have some paint to work with. I'm going to continue over here on the right-hand side of the canvas, applying the same aqua color underneath the swath of red. I'm not going to carry this quite down to the bottom of the canvas on the right-hand side, but I am going to pick up now some of the purple mixture, and we're going to start right underneath our jug, and we're going to apply this purple mixture right underneath the jug, and we'll be coming back and making a shadow under here, but right now we're just establishing the background. So we're going to put that color on, again using nice vertical strokes, trying to keep the background all moving in the same direction, because there's plenty of movement in the painting, and keeping the background with the vertical strokes is going to make it a little less in competition with the painting. So I'm going to pick up some titanium white and just add that in between and work the brush back and forth, softening the transition between the aqua and the purple. And you see how you start to develop some nice, interesting tones here. Okay, so I was blending down here, and I'm just going to continue to soften my aqua color by adding some white on my brush and blending that in so that you see some variation in value or tone as you lighten some areas with the white. And then we're just going to take what's on our brush and continue to move this back across the canvas. This is where you end up with some interesting color variations. I picked up a little bit of purple. Just brushing that on, and then I'll begin to blend it in using, again, the long vertical strokes. And I really like how you get some of these little choppy brush marks. Now we have this area to work on, so I'm going to pick up some more titanium white on my brush and added a little bit of floating medium to this so that it blends or work goes on the canvas. I add a little bit of titanium white and FolkArt floating medium on my brush so that it spreads on the canvas a little bit more easily. And once again, just moving one color into the other color and softening the area where the two colors meet. If you apply with pressure, you can really lay on some color and then blend using a lighter touch. That's a key item to remember. Apply with pressure, blend with less pressure. And I'm taking this dirty brush and just continuing all along the bottom of the canvas. I'm going to pick up a little bit more purple over here so that I've got some stronger purple meeting my aqua color. Again, when you need more color, pick up some color and some floating medium and apply it to the canvas using long vertical strokes. I really like these interesting colors that you get when your purple and aqua blend together. You want to be sure that you can always see the different colors. You don't want everything to merge into one kind of harmonious or homogeneous color. You want to see the variation in the colors that you've applied to your canvas. We'll pick up a little bit more of my aqua color and begin to move that over from the left side toward the jug. And it doesn't matter if some paint gets inside the jug. I want to keep my brush moving vertically so that I get these nice brush marks that you can see right here. And I'm thinking right now, this is probably all I want to do at this point. I could come back. Well, let's go ahead and do that. Now that since we're down here, I'm going to wipe my brush again, pinch it between the shop towel so that you groom it back to a nice chisel edge. And I'm going to pick up some dioxazine purple on my brush and add a small amount of floating medium so that it's easier to apply this to the canvas. And I'm going to begin right underneath my jug to apply a little bit of a dark, intense shadow. And then I'm going to just soften some of this out on either side of the jug. And this is just the beginning of establishing the very dark shadow that will be underneath the jug when we're done. But just this little bit gives us some intense color and kind of helps our jug sit down in the painting. When your canvas has reached this level of completion, I think it's a good idea to pause the video and dry your painting so that you can keep your hands out of what you've done at the bottom and then be ready to start establishing the dark part of our floral arrangement in the jug. Our canvas is nice and dry now so that we don't need to worry about putting our hands in any wet paint. And we're going to begin by establishing some of this dark area that's in our floral arrangement. And I've put out some new colors on my palette. So I'm going to now use some FolkArt Sap Green. And a new color on the palette is Payne's Gray. So it looks like black, but it's really a very, very intense dark blue color. So I'm brush mixing my Payne's Gray and Sap Green together on a number 12 flat brush. And we're going to come up here onto our canvas, and I'm going to just begin to pat this color on. I'm not adding any FolkArt floating medium to this because I want this color to be very opaque as I'm putting it on, picking up more paint as I need it, and I'm just establishing the darkest areas of the painting. Don't worry if you get some of the dark green into your flower petals, that's going to be perfectly fine. We just want to establish the darkest areas of our painting. I'm just patting this color on, and I want you to notice how I'm holding my brush. I'm holding my brush with the handle where the pinky meets the palm, just like that, and so I'm applying the paint in a very casual way. If you hold the brush like a pencil, you'll paint in a very tightly rendered fashion, and we want this to be much looser than that. If this color isn't dark enough at the end of our painting, we can of course come back and change it, but strive for something very, very dark so that our lighter colors will really show up when we're finished with our painting. And I'm just going to scrub this using the corner of my brush, not worrying about the outside edges because I have the jug to paint underneath this. And I'm not thinking of this as leaves or anything. It actually is some greenery to this, but I only want you to think about it in terms of creating some dark areas in your painting. And I am sure that I will paint my sunflower petals in a little bit different way on this painting than I did on the painting that you're seeing the finished example of. So every sunflower is going to be different, so the petals will all end up being a little bit different size and shape and location. So don't worry too much about that. We're just filling in, establishing our dark area of the painting. When you're painting in a loose impressionistic style, it's more important that you think of color and shape rather than subject matter while you're painting. I'm going to continue over here and add some dark green in this area. And again, think of it as a dark green shape or a dark green area of color rather than any particular subject matter. And we'll continue just to add some more dark green here. Let that carry off to the edge of the canvas. We have another dark area behind these sunflowers. So once again, we'll fill this in, still using sap green plus Payne's Gray. Just brush mixing this as I go so that I have some variety in the color that I'm putting on the canvas. You have to establish really nice dark areas so that you can have nice bright highlights. If everything on your canvas is the same value, then there's nothing interesting on your canvas for anyone to look at. I'm just using the corner of my brush now to kind of scrub some of this green color out, letting it trail away a little bit. Just looking to evaluate where I've got some more dark green areas on here. And there's a little bit more up here, so I'm going to put some on and just use the corner of my brush and just trail that color out a little bit. And we've got plenty more to do on some of these areas, so don't think this is the end of it. We're just establishing areas of color. I think I'll put a little bit out here. If you need more paint, don't be afraid to pick up some more on your brush. Again, it's a brush mixture of sap green and Payne's gray. And just scrub on the corner of your brush to stretch that color out a little bit so that you don't end up with a harsh line of green. Okay, I think that's all I'm going to do right now. We will come back and paint a little bit more on here. We'll add some more light colors in there to help break up some of this dark area. Now I'm going to pick up my 1-inch flat brush and I'm going to load it with Naphthol Crimson, which I have here on my palette. And I've got 2 red areas on the canvas that need to be filled in. I'm going to begin filling in this large swath of red. And just load your brush up with the Naphthol Crimson and apply it to this big red swath here. It's sort of like a swath of fabric, if you will. And I'm going to bring that right up next to the big jug. Just trying to establish the edge of the jug here. And then I'll lay in the top edge of this swath. And then we'll do the same thing at the bottom edge. And then we'll just fill in the entire section. We will, of course, do more to this, but we're just basing this area in. Once you get the color on there, then use the flat surface of your brush to stretch it out. You want a nice, even coverage of red, but you don't need a thick application of paint. I have not added any floating medium to this. I'm just using the Naphthol Crimson. And again, put the paint on and then stretch it out. Pick up more paint when you need it. Okay, that side's nicely done. I'm going to now establish the lower edge of this swath. And then fill in the center of the swath using the Naphthol Crimson. If you need to pick up more paint on your brush, by all means do that. Apply it to the canvas and then stretch the paint out. Okay, I'm just going to brush a little bit more Naphthol Crimson on because I want to have a little bit more wet paint to work into. So I'm going to brush this right up next to the jug and then stretch this color out. I'm going to wipe my brush on my shop towel. Again, put the brush on the shop towel, fold the shop towel over the bristles, pull. That'll take the excess paint off the brush and groom it to a nice chisel edge. And I'm going to pick up some FolkArt Pure Artist Pigment Alizarin Crimson. Again, not adding any floating medium to this. And I'm going to paint this right next to the jug. And you can see that it's a little bit deeper red tone. So we're going to brush this on next to the jug and then blend this out into the swath of red. And we're not concerning ourselves with a really smoothly blended area here. We're just changing the tone of the red a little bit. And we're going to do some more of this changing of tone, but we're starting with a little alizarin crimson and we're blending that in. Do the same thing over here on the right hand side. Pick up that alizarin crimson and apply it next to the jug. And then blend that color into the Naphthol Crimson. I'm going to wipe my brush. Once again, fold the shop towel over, pull, and clean the brush off of the alizarin crimson. And I'm going to pick up some pure orange. I'm going to apply that next to the edge of the canvas. And then I'm going to blend this beautiful orange toward the jug, softening that color in, just changing the tone of the swath of red so that it's not a solid tone, but now we've got a little bit of dark and a little bit of light in this area. So wipe my brush again on my shop towel. Just take that excess red off the brush. I'm going to load it again with pure orange, and I'm going to begin on the left edge of the canvas to apply this color. And I'm applying it using a firm pressure. And then as I begin to blend and merge this color toward the jug, I'm going to apply less pressure on my brush as I blend and soften this color in. And you can see we've got a nice bit of orange highlight there at the edge, and we just want to soften that highlight color in. Creating some tonal variation in this big swath of red that's cutting across our canvas. Okay, I'm going to now block in the jug. So I want to do something a little bit different because I don't want everything to look just the same. I'm going to take Naphthol Crimson and I'm going to add some yellow ochre to this, which is going to change the color a little bit. I'm going to add a little bit more yellow ochre because I want this jug to have a bit more of an orangey look to it than just something solid red. So mixing this with my palette knife so that I've got a nice amount of the same color to block in the jug. So when I'm finished mixing my color, I'm going to clean my palette knife off and set it aside. Then I'll pick up my 1-inch flat brush. We're painting lots of big areas, so make sure to use a large brush to do this. And then I'm going to carefully establish the edges of the jug. And you do want to make sure that the very outside edge of the jug is nice and smooth. It does take a little while to block in these large areas, so take your time. Be sure to use enough paint to get good coverage. Okay, once again, establishing the outside edge of the jug, and then we'll begin to fill in the inside. I'm going to leave part of this handle exposed over here so that I know where that is. It'll be easier to come back and paint it in a little bit later. If you get a little bit of paint in it, that's okay. Just work neatly and carefully as you block in the jug. Again, put the paint on and then stretch it out as you fill in the jug. Okay, as I'm putting this on, I'm realizing that I didn't mix up enough of the color initially, so I'm going to just stop and make another puddle of the same color. It's Naphthol Crimson plus Yellow Ochre, so I'm going to mix it right in the same spot, just adding more Naphthol Crimson to that area. Wipe my palette knife off and pick up Yellow Ochre and then mix that in. Remember to mix and push the color into the center to keep your nice puddle of paint workable, and mix by mashing the paint together, not stirring. Okay, I'm going to clean my palette knife off and set that down. Pick up my 1-inch flat brush and begin to just apply this color to the jug stretching it out as I go. And this is just the base color for the jug. We've got lots of shading and highlight to put on there, so it will be very different when we're finished. We're just establishing the red color at this point. Take your time, apply the color to the canvas, and then stretch that color out. You don't want an excessive amount of paint on the canvas. Just want to make sure to get a nice coverage on here. And you don't want you don't want any pinholes of white to be showing through if you can help it. Okay, we need to paint the rim of the jug, and you might want to use a smaller brush to fill in that area because it is a smaller area. So I'm going to shift to a number 12 flat brush. And we're going to carefully paint in the edges of the rim of the jug. And then just fill in around our sunflower petals and these green masses. Just work the color right up next to it. If it overlaps it a little bit, that's perfectly fine. You just don't want white to be showing through. Let's block in the handle of the jug on this side. Use the chisel edge of the brush to establish the outside edge. And make sure that you've got a nice curve to the handle. And let's not forget the handle on this side. Begin right up next to this dark green area. And then to make this a little bit more obvious as it comes across the front of the jug, I'm going to add a little more yellow ochre and just a little bit of pure orange to this. Just making this color a little bit lighter so that it shows up in front of the jug. And it will show up more when we apply some shadowing underneath the handle, but we're not doing that at this point. I think right now that was a lot of blocking in of our jug and this red swath. So I think it's a good time to pause your video now and use your hairdryer or heat gun to dry all of this so that we can come back and start to work on top of it without disturbing any of this layer. Okay, now that we have everything nice and dry, we're going to begin to do some glazing to establish some dark shadows on our jug. So I'm going to take my 1-inch flat brush and pick up some floating medium on it, and it was just dirty with the same color that I blocked in my jug, and you can see that there's now a big color difference here. The FolkArt Pure Artist pigments dry to a completely matte finish, and when they're wet again, like either with floating medium paint or a varnish, the color returns to its initial pristine state. So that's why it's always important that you varnish your paintings to bring the color back. So we're just adding dirty brush and floating medium on here. This is just so that I have something to blend my color into. So we're establishing the darker area on the vase, and we'll do this in a couple of different layers so it does not all have to happen at once. So I'm just scrubbing this on, letting it fade into the center area of the jug. And you can see very clearly on the finished painting where the dark areas are. So along the bottom and up the left side is where we're going to be working initially. And so I'm going to pick up some alizarin crimson on my brush, and we're going to put some of that on right along the right-hand side of the jug. And then we're just going to blend and soften that into the floating medium. And this is a really nice technique to master so that you can always come back and alter the color on your painting. You can add more dark, you can add more light, but it's always nice to have something slick to blend your paint into. And I love it when this starts to get just a little bit sticky, not terribly sticky, but just enough so that the paint pulls just a little bit, and you will then be able to blend this color beautifully onto the jug. So I'm just softening this out, and you can see that we've added a nice bit of dark color there, and we're going to continue darkening the jug. I'm going to take my alizarin crimson, and I'm going to add a small amount of dioxazine purple to this, and I'm just brush mixing that in, creating a very nice burgundy color. And I'm going to start at the base of the jug, apply some of this really, really dark burgundy right along the base of the jug, and then some up the right-hand side. Establishing some of that really, really nice dark color. And then while this paint is still nice and workable, I'm going to begin to soften it into the jug, moving it from the outside edge in toward the center. And you're going to have to work to make this stretch out and soften into that kind of sticky floating medium. And you could see on the finished painting that there are lots of brush marks that show, and that's perfectly fine. Once again, we are showing the audience that this is completely hand painted. And so seeing the brush marks, I think, is an attractive way to let them know that it's not mechanically reproduced. Okay, just making sure that I've got a nice dark edge on the jug. Cleaning that edge up a little bit. And then softening it in. And I've got the outside shape of my jug is not right there, so I need to come back and just clean that up just a little bit. There we go. Now we've got a nice edge there. And again, just soften this in to that sticky floating medium. And don't worry about some of your brush marks showing. That's perfectly fine. Work your brush in multiple directions. If you need to, pick up a little more floating medium on your brush and continue to soften that color into the jug a little bit. I'm going to continue on the above the handle and just soften this color on. Stretching that color out as I need to. We haven't begun to highlight the jug yet, so don't worry about how this darker shading is looking at this point. We're going to add some shading onto the right-hand edge of the lip of the jug, or the rim of the jug. Make sure you have enough paint on your brush. And just soften that in just a little bit. I'm going to take some of that real dark color, which is alizarin crimson plus some dioxazine purple, and I'm going to establish like a mark where the neck of the jug meets the body of the jug. Just lay that on. And then we're going to leave that alone. I'm going to shade underneath this dark green area. Wipe the excess paint off of my brush, and I'm going to just soften that in to the handle. Making it darker on the right-hand side. I'm going to shift down to my number 12 flat brush, and we're going to establish this kind of little turn where you can see the underside of the handle. Push that back a little bit so it's not off the handle at all. Come back with a little bit more paint and darken that a little bit more. If you don't get it dark enough in one pass, you can always come back after this is dried and darken it a little bit more. Let's add just a little bit of dark color where the handle meets the jug over here. Take the excess paint off my brush, and we'll soften that upwards a little bit. And I think that's good for the dark color that we need on our vase at this point. So if you want to, you can pause now and dry this area, and then we'll come back and add a little bit more dark shading here and there, and then we'll start to develop some of the light areas on the jug. All right, now that we have dried the initial shading on our jug, we're going to begin to develop some of the highlighting that we're going to have on our jug. There's going to be a lot more that goes on the main portion of the jug, but we're going to start now with the handles, the rim, and we're going to begin to lighten those. I'm going to start with the initial block-in color, which was Naphthol Crimson plus Yellow Ochre, and I'm going to add just a little bit of pure orange to this. You're just brush mixing this new color right here on the palette. And I'm going to start right here on this handle, brushing some of this lighter color on and letting it come back over the dark. It doesn't really look like it's that much lighter because of the color change that we had when we dried the paint. So I'll just add a little bit more yellow ochre to this, and we'll begin to soften some of this light color back into the shading. I'm going to do the same thing on the top rim of the jug, so I'll add more pure orange and more yellow ochre. And we'll highlight this left edge, just kind of dragging this highlight in. And just, if I need to, use the corner of my brush just to kind of scratch and soften that onto the rim of the jug a little bit. We'll continue with the same color over here, and we'll highlight this curved portion of the handle. You can come back and add a little bit more yellow ochre to this highlight. And now you can see how you've got that nice shadow underneath the handle as it turns. I'm going to add a little bit more yellow ochre to my palette. And I'm going to pick up some of that yellow ochre and just create a little bit lighter color here with the initial block-in color of the jug, which was Naphthol Crimson plus Yellow Ochre, and I'm adding some pure orange to that, just creating a lighter red tone. I'm going to take some of the excess paint off of my brush because I was brush mixing and there's plenty of paint in my brush, but I don't want it all over the outside edge. And once again, I'm just going to reapply the lightest highlight over here and just scrub a little bit of that in. And I'm going to begin to establish the lightest area on my jug. It's going to be right here where the shoulder of the jug is the widest. So because I'm now painting in a big area, I need to be back with my large 1-inch flat brush. So I'll just wipe any color out of the brush, and I'll pick up this highlight color. Again, the base coat color for the jug with additional yellow ochre and pure orange brush mixed in. I'll take the excess paint off of the outside of my brush just by wiping it carefully on a shop towel, and then we'll begin to scrub this color on, making sure that the outside edges are a little bit feathered. Apply some color, and then using the dry brush begin to extend and stretch that color out. You, of course, can use the corner of your brush to kind of scratch and stretch that color out a little bit. Keep picking up small amounts of paint as you need it. And really just let that color just begin to stretch very thinly over that dark shading that we applied earlier. We just want to kind of break up that line of shading. And we want to soften this color out, stretching it out until it's just a veil of color as it trails off from the edge. I think this is one of the more important lessons of this painting, is to not use too much paint, but just to stretch that paint out as much as you can so that it's just a veil of color at the edges of your lighter area. Continue to brush mix the color, apply it, and then stretch that color out. So far, we're only lightening our color with the addition of more yellow ochre and pure orange. There will be more to come. It's at this point that many people will try to rush through this step, and you will end up with a very, very spotty looking vase, and you really don't want that. You want to add this color on and spend the time to really stretch this color out. I hope that none of you are ever in a rush while you're painting. You should be taking this time to thoroughly enjoy the entire process of creating a painting. It's an enjoyable thing. It's not a race to be won. It should be fun, relaxing, and enjoyable for you. So take your time and do each step as well as you can before you move on to the next step. How you hold the brush is important, so hold your brush where the handle is in the palm of your hand and you are gripping the brush sort of like a magic wand, and it makes all the difference in the world to how your paint is applied to the canvas and how you're able to stretch that paint out. Apply some color and then stretch it out. After a while, this becomes very methodical and very soothing to work like this. All right, I'm pretty happy with the way this is looking right now, so I'm going to take a moment. I think you can pause your video, and I want to dry this layer of highlighting on there before we come back and evaluate what the next value should be to continue highlighting the jug. My initial layer of highlighting is dry on my jug, so we're going to continue with more highlighting. I've switched back to my number 12 flat brush, and I'm going to pick up more yellow ochre and pure orange, and I'm just brush mixing this into the same puddle of paint that I had before. It's now mostly yellow ochre and pure orange, and we're going to apply this where we want our light colors again. So over here on the right handle of the jug, I'm going to add some nice highlights on there. Just put those on, and I'm not going to try to blend and soften them in. I'm just going to let them be. I'm going to add a brighter highlight on the left-hand side of the jug on the rim. A little bit on the left handle of the jug. It's not really showing up there too well, so I'm going to add just a smidgen of titanium white, and I'm going to brush mix that in. And then we'll come back and we'll add that on there. Oh, that's much better. You can see that. Add it right up here too. All right, so this is the first white that I've added to the painting, and so we'll see that our initial area where we started our highlighting is still where we want this to be, the lightest and the brightest. So we're going to just kind of mark the spot there. I'll switch back to my 1-inch flat brush. I want to pinch the brush, make sure to clean out the paint that's in it, and groom it back to a nice chisel edge. And I'm going to take my base mixture, which was Naphthol Crimson plus yellow ochre. I'm adding more yellow ochre, more pure orange to this, and then I'm going to add a small amount of titanium white, and I'm just going to brush mix this together. I want to make sure that on my palette this looks more orange than pink. So we'll take the excess paint off the outside of our brush, and we'll lay this color on and see if that's light enough. It's not really light enough, so I'm going to add a bit more titanium white to my palette and mix this in again with my brush. So I'm really adding more white and more pure orange at this point. Brush mixing the color, taking the excess off of the outside of my brush, and we'll lay that color on, and that looks great. You can see a nice value difference between the last color and this. So I'll put this on where I want that color to be the very brightest, and then I'll just begin to stretch that color out, making sure that the edge is just a veil of color. Can add more paint as I need to, and then continue just to brush and stretch that out a little bit more. I don't want to completely cover up the last layer of highlighting. And it looks great when you stretch this out and you can still see some of the other color underneath. It lets you know that this is a very textured jug and is not a highly shiny glazed ceramic piece. It's something that's been old and weathered, like it came from the old country. Use the edge of your brush, the corner of your brush, if you need to help stretch that paint out a little bit more. And this is just setting up a nice light area for our final highlights. This is brightest at the widest part of the jug. And I think we can leave it at this point now, and we will begin to work a little bit on our sunflowers. We're going to start by establishing some of the centers of the sunflower, and for that I'm going to wipe my number 12 flat brush on my shop towel, pinch it between the towel, pull it through and groom it back to a nice chisel edge. And I'm going to use pure orange to establish the lighter areas of my sunflower centers. So I'm going to start up here at this little sunflower, and I'm just dabbing and stroking on some pure orange. That's establishing that center, and then we'll come down here to this flower, stroke a little orange on. Just establishing the center. There's going to be a lot more that happens to these sunflower centers, so this is just the very beginning of establishing where the centers of the sunflower are. And it doesn't matter if you get some of this out into the petals, that's perfectly fine. So you just put this color on and soften it back just a little bit. Alright, I'm adding some burnt sienna to my palette, and burnt sienna is a nice, rich, rusty red color. So I'm going to wipe the pure orange off my brush, and I'm going to pick up burnt sienna. And I have not dipped my brush in water or cleaned my brush in any way, but I am going to begin to just put in this dark area of the center and kind of scrub some of this burnt sienna out into the orange so that they softly merge together. They're not completely blended, but we do want to merge some of the burnt sienna in with the pure orange. We'll establish the shape of the sunflower center, and again we'll just work some of this burnt sienna into our orange, softening the two together. We'll do the same up here at this little center. And just continue to add burnt sienna to all of our sunflower centers. As I said, there's going to be a lot more done to the center of these sunflowers, so we're just establishing kind of where the centers are, giving each one a light and a dark side. All right, I'm going to wipe my brush out pretty well, give it a good wipe so that we remove most of the color from the brush. I'm going to refold my shop towel so that I've got a clean place to wipe the brush. So really give it a nice thorough wipe. And we're going to just lay in some gold color on our sunflowers. So I'm going to dip my brush into my floating medium, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of yellow ochre and floating medium together on my brush. And we are going to very loosely establish the shape of our sunflower petals. So I've got some sunflower petals back here, so I'm just using the corner of my brush and I'm adding a little bit of yellow ochre back here. We'll add some yellow ochre that's coming out from the center of our sunflower out onto the petals. I can pat this color on, I can stroke it out into the petals a little bit. Just establishing a little bit of a base color for my petals. I'm also going to establish a little bit of a dark area where this sunflower is kind of tucked behind this other sunflower. Again, just establishing a little base color there. I've got another sunflower down here, so we'll establish some of this, keeping the color closer to the center, and then just letting some of it scratch out into the petals, not trying to define or fill in a petal. We're just establishing the general area where the sunflower is going to be. Don't try to overpaint this at this point. All right, over here I've got a sunflower in profile, so I'm just going to add some of this yellow ochre at the base of the petals where they go behind the calyx of the sunflower. Scratch this color out. Look, there's some red and orange coming off of my brush. That's beautiful. Love to see those different colors showing up. Got another sunflower here. We'll establish some color here on these petals. This is where the painting starts to get fun. We've got some great big yellow petals that we're going to be putting on there, and we're just setting the stage right now with a little yellow ochre to establish the sunflowers themselves. Continuing with yellow ochre plus just a little bit of floating medium, and that floating medium is making the paint very easy to apply, and it's also making it somewhat transparent. I'm going to come behind this big sunflower that's in front, and then right along the center, and just stretching some of this yellow ochre out. Some of it gets in the center, that's perfectly fine. We're just really getting some color on these flower petals, so it's a little easier to paint them in just a few minutes. Just scratching some of this color on. So much fun to paint these beautiful, happy sunflowers. Now we're going to just stroke some of this yellow ochre on this big sunflower here and stretch this color out. I'm using really the corner of my brush to really kind of stroke and stretch this color out into the petals. All right, we've got another little profile sunflower up here, so we'll just establish this with a little bit of yellow ochre. Not worrying about him too much because he's not really an important flower in the painting, but we do need to get some color going up there. And the same is true with this really kind of pale sunflower shape that we've got going on here. And again, when some red comes out, that's perfectly fine. Looks really nice. Really just stretching this color out, establishing the shape of our sunflower. So I think we've got enough of the yellow ochre on here. But of course it's very hard to leave well enough alone. So I am just going to add a little bit more here and there just to bring some of this gold color out to where it meets our green mass. That's just going to make painting the sunflower petals a little easier because I don't have to worry about covering up any of the white of the canvas because I'm doing that right now with a very casual application of some yellow ochre. Not going to go wrong, just applying some of this out there. If some of it goes out into that green shape, that's perfectly fine, don't fret. Establishing some underneath color or some mass tone to our sunflowers. Okay, I think at this point we've established where our sunflowers are going to go, and before we can continue to paint them, we need to have them dry. So it's a good time to pause your video and let your sunflowers dry or dry them with a heat gun, and then we'll come back and start to add some more depth and definition to our flowers. All right, now that our painting is completely dry, we're going to add our final highlight here on our jug. So I'm going to take that orangey yellow ochre color, and I'm going to add a little bit more titanium white to that. And I'm just mixing that on my palette knife. I want it to be a nice light orangey color. So I'm going to check to see if it's lighter. It's a little bit lighter. I think it still could benefit from the addition of some more titanium white. So I'm just going to mix that in with my palette knife. And just while I have the color on the back of my palette knife, I'm going to establish the lightest highlight. And I've got the paint on the back of the palette knife, and I'm just going to skim this highlight on right here, the shoulder of the jug where it's the lightest. Skim both directions. Then I'm going to wipe the paint off of my palette knife, and I'm going to come back and just kind of smudge and soften that a little bit until the shape suits me. And I think that's perfectly fine right now. So just because we're adding the highlight with a palette knife doesn't mean it's necessarily a one and done. You can come back and using your palette knife completely parallel to the surface, you can kind of rub and soften it a little bit to create a nicer shape if you need to. Now, let's add some more dark color to our jug. So I am going to clean out my 1-inch flat brush a little bit because I want to take that light color that was in there. I want to get some of that white and the creamy color out of my brush so that it's not going to make my shading any lighter. And I'm going to use some floating medium, some alizarin crimson, some dioxazine purple, which is what we did our initial shading, or last shading with. And to this, I'm going to add a little Payne's gray and a very small amount of sap green. And this is going to give me a very, very rich shading color. And I'm going to apply this right where the purple meets the bottom of our vase. And I'm just going to brush that out a little bit. But I'm coming up over the edge of the vase and onto my purple shadow so that I create what's called a lost edge. So now you can't tell where the edge of the jug stops and the shadow underneath it starts. Just making a little bit more of my dark color here on my palette. And then I'm going to continue by brushing some of this dark color onto the vase or the jug. I'm going to continue it across the bottom here. And then I'm going to wipe my brush on my shop towel, taking the excess paint off. And then I'll use the corner of my brush and I'll begin just to stretch this extra dark shading out and softening it a little bit. But I want to leave a pretty dark area on the vase. I want to carry some of that all the way out to the very edge so that I create a nice contrast with this red swath. There we've got a nice contrasting area of color there. Just apply some and then stretch that color out a little bit. Really want to lose the bottom edge of the jug where it sits down on the indication of a table. All right, so now we've got lots of dark there. We've got a nice highlight, and we have added this extra shadow where the vase kind of meets this shadow on the table area, and you can't tell where the shadow starts and the vase stops. So that's exactly what we're looking for in those areas. All right, I need to kind of clean up my palette, so I think this is a good time to stop the video. You can dry this area, and I am going to shift myself to a new palette. Okay, everything is dry on the canvas, and now we have this swath of kind of this aqua color that we're going to put on there, and I could use the same color that we used in the background, but I think I want to make this just a little bit more intense. So I am going to take a portion of that original color, and I'm going to move it to a clean spot on my palette, and I'm going to add a little bit more Prussian blue and yellow light to this. So I need to put some Prussian blue out. I neatened up my palette and don't have everything back the way I should. So we'll just put a little Prussian blue out there. And then we can add a little bit of blue. Not too much. You always want to add this very incrementally. So I'm adding some blue just to deepen the color. And then I will add a small amount of yellow light to this just to help make it a bit more aqua. And again, every time that you mix a color, it's going to have some variation in it. So here on my palette, I want to really see how closely related these two colors are. So I'm putting some of the original color there, and I think that's a nice contrast. So I'm going to take a 1-inch flat brush and some floating medium. I'll dress the brush in the floating medium, and that simply means to work the floating medium into the brush. And I'm going to start with my initial color of the aqua, and I'm going to start at the top of my swath and just brush some of this initial color right along the top edge and let a little of that carry up above the transferred design line so that it's a little easier to blend this into the previous background area. And then we'll switch over to the new aqua color, which is a little darker and a bit more intense. And we'll brush this on. Filling in the area and blending it up to the top, and it too can carry just a little bit over the initial transfer design lines. Okay, we'll do the same thing on the left side of our canvas. Fill in. And this red and turquoise makes such a beautiful contrast. So we'll just fill this in and blend it using vertical strokes. And it softens in very, very nicely. If you need to make the paint easier to move, add a small amount of floating medium to it. That'll help you get a nice crisp line up against the jug. Okay, now everyone thinks that a drip is a very casual, kind of haphazard thing that happens, when in reality it requires some planning. So I am going to use my 1-inch flat brush and the darker aqua color, but I'm going to dip my brush into water and I'm going to thin this paint out on my palette. And it takes a considerable amount of water to thin this paint down because the FolkArt Pure Artist Pigment is a very, very thick paint. So you have to work to make it thin. So just continue to add water till I've got a nice fluid puddle of paint here on my palette. And then in the original painting, I think I went a little bit overboard with some of the drips. So on this one, I'm going to be a little bit more reserved, but I'm going to add some of this fluid paint right along the bottom edge of the swath of aqua. And since nothing dripped, I'm going to dip my brush back in water, thin my paint down. Got quite a bit now here on my brush, and I'm just going to keep tapping this on the canvas, letting the paint kind of fall off the brush, and there we go. There comes a nice drip. It's not moving too fast, so I'm going to pick up a little bit more water. I can come back right above that little drip, tap the brush on the canvas, releasing some more paint and water, and that little drip will now, it's got plenty of paint and it'll continue to drip, and I'm just going to let it run down the canvas, and I'm going to turn my attention to the left side of the painting, and I will apply some of my aqua color along the border of the red swath. Then I'll pick up more water on the brush mix this in so that my paint is very, very fluid, and I have a considerable amount of water on the brush. And we'll just tap, tap, tap to see where a drip starts. We'll move on over a little bit. Tapping, 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 releasing the paint from the brush, adding some more water if it's not flowing fast enough yet. Come back over here, tap, tap, tap. And you could see that these little drips just start, but it takes a lot of water to make the drips happen, and you just have to keep patting and tapping the canvas to get the drips to release and start to run down the canvas. Make sure your canvas is quite vertical. You don't want your drips running at some strange angle. And just brushing some color on, allowing it to run and drip, and we're just going to let this continue to drip off of the edge of the canvas. And now I'm going to wipe my brush very thoroughly on my shop towel, and I want to take my initial putty color, and I want to add a little bit of asphaltum to my palette. And asphaltum is a beautiful, transparent, golden brown color. And I'm going to take my original putty color, pick some of that up on my brush, and I'm going to brush mix in just a little bit of asphaltum to warm that color up and darken it just a little bit. I'm going to fill my brush with this deeper brown putty tone. I want this paint to be very, very fluid because we're going to do some more runs and drips. So load my flat brush with this thinned paint, and I'm going to start up here right off the edge of the canvas, and you can see that that color is a little bit darker. So I'm just brushing a little bit of this color on, and I'm going to run it into the sunflowers there. Then thinning the paint even more with water. I'm going to begin to pat that color on at the top and let some of this just run and drip down the canvas. Just picking up some more water on my brush and just kind of brushing and patting this color along. And I am watching where these drips are going. And I've got a shop towel at the ready, so I'm just going to pat a little bit more water on. And as they start to reach down a little bit, where I am fine with where they are now, but I don't want them to go all the way down. So before they hit that aqua, I'm just going to put my shop towel there to catch the drips. And just have to continue to watch what's happening on your canvas and blot these up here. Stop that drip action there. Stop this down here again. Just blotting, and then I'll just let it continue to wash down, and they'll stop where where I've blotted them. And this is how you create these little runs and drips. It takes a little bit more work to make them look as spontaneous as they do. And at this point, we don't need to stop the cameras, but I'm just going to take my heat gun and I'm going to dry this just a little bit. And that shows you could stop your drips where they are running. And I'm just going to blot some of this excess moisture off. Okay, so where my paint was very, very thin, where I was causing my little runs and drips, I need to come back and add a little bit more paint back onto my canvas. So I'll just come back and just dab a little bit of that aqua color on there. And then down here at the bottom, I can just take this and brush some of that darker aqua color on. And pick up some titanium white, mix that into what was my thin paint there, and come back and add some white highlights. And this is just basically repeating what we did at the beginning of the painting, but now we're just softening these drips in so that there's some variation there with our aqua color, and I'll do a little bit of that over here as well. Just again adding some of the aqua and white over here, creating a little bit of tonal variation on the canvas. Looking at the left side of the canvas, I think I want to come back and put a little bit more bright white on there and soften that in just a little bit, just for variety. Then I'm just going to leave this the way that is after I put just a little bit of a bright stroke of white on there. Okay, so now we've got lots of runs and drips and stuff happening on the canvas, and that's very, very fun to do. Let's try not to overdo that. And we're going to now begin to establish a little bit more dark color on our sunflowers, both on the petals and the centers. And we're going to do that with the asphaltum. So I'm going to pick up some asphaltum on my brush and add a little bit of the floating medium just to make everything move a little bit easier. And we're going to add some of this at the dark side of our sunflower center. And if you've got too much on your brush, wipe your brush and then just use the corner to soften that color out. We're not done with the darkening of the centers. This is just an interim stage here. Just don't want anything to have a super hard defined edge. Your painting will look much softer if everything has just a little bit of a broken edge to it. And now I'm going to take some of this asphaltum and floating medium together on my number 12 flat brush, and I'm just going to help set some of the sunflower petals back a little further than others, especially where we've got one sunflower hiding behind another one. We'll just add some extra shading there. It's really easy to do this with the FolkArt Pure Artist Pigment Asphaltum because it's already a transparent color. Okay, I think that's probably enough of this extra dark color on here. But it's really easy to just get a little carried away with it, and that's okay. All right, now let's take some of our initial aqua color that we made, and I'm just going to move it a little closer to me here on the palette. And I'm going to brush mix a little bit of that aqua with a little sap green, just creating a lighter green mixture here on my palette. And I can add just a little bit of floating medium just to help this paint move a little bit easier. And I'm going to add some of this, now this lighter green color, into my green areas just to create some light patches here and there. Again, not trying to create any particular shape, just a few little light areas in there just to break this up so that it isn't all one value of dark green. Don't get hung up on exactly how much of this you put on there or exactly where it's landing. We're just adding some light color to help break up this dark green shape and give it a little bit of interest. If you run a little bit of this off the edge, that's going to be fine because it'll settle into that background because the colors are very close in value. I'm going to wipe my brush of that kind of green mixture, and I'm going to pick up just some of the initial aqua color And we're going to add some lighter, brighter bits here and there. You can see these. Going to continue to add a little bit of our original aqua just here and there for some bright areas within our mass of greens. And some of these can just carry right off of that green shape and into the background a little bit. That's not going to hurt anything. In fact, it'll soften those edges up even more. Don't want to do this all over, and we certainly don't want to do too much of it. But we do want to have a few little glints of some little highlights in this dark patch. I'm going to clean my filbert brush out now in some water because I want to take this light color out of my brush, and I want to add some really, really dark color to the brush. So I'm going to take some sap green and Payne's gray, and I'm going to mix this together on my brush, and I'm going to say it's about 60-40 Payne's gray to green. And I'm going to add just a little bit of floating medium to make this color move a little bit easier for me. Just brush mixing this on my palette, and we are going to tuck in some really, really dark areas here and there. You don't want to use pure black because black is such a harsh color, and it really can just kind of punch a hole in your painting, and that's not what we want to do. We just want to have some very, very dark areas, darker than what we initially put on, and just emphasizing some of this shadowing. In order to have really bright, attractive highlights, you have to have very, very dark shading on your painting. That's an absolute must. And that doesn't really matter what style of painting you're doing. Your highlights just don't show up unless you have nice shading to contrast with that. So I'm just going to put a little bit more of this here and there where I think some of the darker areas would be. Just tuck this dark in. And I promise you we will paint some sunflower petals. It's just there's a lot of other stuff going on in this painting, and you just need to get that in before you drop those petals on. And while we have this dark color on our brush, let's just emphasize another area of this painting that needs to have a little more dark to it. I'm going to add a little bit more dark right over here on the right edge of the jug neck. Just tucking a little bit of that same dark color on there. And then we've got kind of a bit of a line where the neck and the body of the jug come together, and we want that to be super dark. So let's just come back and brush a nice kind of broken dark line on there. And that's really, really nice to have that extra dark shading. I'm going to put a little bit under here and right along there, just increasing that contrast a little bit. And I think that's just about all we need. I did notice one other little place where we could stand to have some very, very dark color. That's right here along the very bottom of our jug where it meets the purple shadow, and then just a little bit up this edge here. And then we'll soften this into our jug, and that's going to create quite a bit of drama. I'm going to take my large 1-inch flat brush that I've been using for painting the jug, and I've picked up a little floating medium on that, and now I'm just going to tickle these edges just a little bit to soften that. And I think that's really, really nice. So we've got some super, super dark shading going on there, and lots of dark scattered up in here. So that creates visual contrast for us. And I believe we are ready to start painting some sunflower petals. So I want to use a number 10 filbert brush, and a filbert brush is shaped like a flat brush, except it doesn't have any corners. It's completely rounded. Some people refer to these as a cat's tongue brush, or if they're really long bristles, they're called an Egbert brush. But this is a traditional number 10 filbert brush, and this is just what we need for our sunflower petals. I'm going to start by using some FolkArt Pure Artist Pigment medium yellow, and I'm loading my filbert brush with this paint and putting a nice amount of paint on the brush, and I'm just going to stroke on a couple of petals here and there just to see how everything is going to look with this light or this medium yellow on my brush. So let's start here and stroke on a petal, and that looks pretty great. Okay, that's looking good over on that side. Let's come back up here to this little flower that's hiding here in the back, and let's stroke on a couple of petals. And you just want to let this color trail off as it meets or comes in toward the center. And you want your petals to be different shapes. So you can lay the brush down and create a nice wide petal there. You can use the brush on the edge and create a more narrow petal. You want your petal shapes to be different, so never the same shape, never the same size, and not equally spaced apart. So we're just stroking these petals on. You want as much variety in these petals as you can get. Make sure that the ends are not all shaped the same. Some should be more pointy, like this. Some can be more rounded. As long as they are different, you're in good shape. So see, we've got a fat petal, we've got a thin one, we've got a pointed one, we've got some squared off. So we've got lots of different shapes going on. And we'll just start back here and we'll just stroke a little bit of a petal on there. This is where it starts to get fun, when you start just laying on these flower petals. And we're not done by any stretch of the imagination. We're just beginning to establish some of these petals using our FolkArt medium yellow. And we're just laying on sunflower petals. This is why we took the time to add that initial yellow ochre, so that you see I don't have to paint all of the petals in order for my sunflower to look nice and full, because I've already got that base of color underneath the petals. All right, I've got a couple of flowers going on here, and I want to just develop them a little bit more. I'm going to stroke on some of these petals that are kind of across the front of the center here on this little flower in the back. And now I'm going to pick up some FolkArt yellow light on my brush. And I'm going to come back and see how this is going to kind of lay on my painting here. So I'm going to set that down. And you can see this is a great example of where this color starts to trail off. Got a nice bright highlight at the end of my petal, and then this color kind of sputters and just trickles down toward the center. So that's looking good. And we don't want to do this all over or on every single petal, but like this petal that's laying right up here across the center. Let's brush that on, and it is nicely contrasting with the center of the sunflower. We'll do another one there. That needs a little extra stroke, and that's okay. You don't want to keep playing in all of the petals, but every now and then you can certainly come back and touch up a petal if it needs some adjusting. But this is really just laying this paint on nice and thick. Love that. Your sunflowers should be happy, bright flowers. And we've got that nice contrast here where we put that extra dark and now we've got that bright yellow right there. That's very, very lovely. That's what we're looking for. Interesting passages on our painting. So you can see here I took, where there was just that one petal back there, I added two different shaped lighter petals to replace that one in the back. I'm going to leave this nice dark petal there and stroke on a bright yellow petal. Okay, now I want to show you just a different way to apply this yellow to your sunflower petals. You can do some of it with a palette knife, and I'm just going to do a little bit of that on this flower, and then I'm going to come and add a couple there, but we're not going to do all of them the same way. So with my palette knife loaded with my yellow, I can stroke on a petal, adjust it if I need to, and this gives you a very different look than the ones that were just stroked on using the filbert brush. So you can use your palette knife if you want to. Some people love the way a palette knife looks on a painting. Just trying to show you some variations of what you can do and how the paint application looks different. So just to combine some on one flower, we'll come back up there and add a little bright petal there. And we'll come back and we'll add just a little stroke of it there. And you see that you get this really thick impasto look, so that you have not only visual texture, but you have literal texture of the paint on the canvas. And sometimes this is awkward because I would like to turn my canvas around, but it's on an easel, so that's easier said than done. Okay, that's fine. Let that carry right out there to the edge of the canvas and just trail off. Let this trail off too. Just going to fill that in just a little bit with some more paint there. There we go. So now we've got this kind of great little broken texture there. And we've got some stroked on petals here. So we are off to the races. And we're just going to continue to stroke on some of this yellow light to form our sunflower petals, picking up more paint as you need it. We'll come up here to this little flower here in the background and just stroke this on without adding the medium yellow underneath it. And this guy is not a central player in the painting. It's kind of a little outlier. So I'm just stroking these petals on pretty fast, and I'm not going to do too much more with this. I'll come back with maybe a little bit of an extra light stroke here or there, but that's basically done. And we're going to treat these others out here pretty much the same way. I could stroke on a little bit more medium yellow on this one here and there. But again, we don't want to worry these. We want these to be fun and happy flowers. So we'll stroke on our yellow light on top of this. And what I really want to do is to bring a little bit of color out and break up that drip a little bit, so that the drip is not as important as our yellow sunflower is. Just stroking on these petals, thinking, never the same shape, never the same size, and always spaced out a little differently. And this is going to get a little, well, this one really isn't going to get that, so I'll just add another little bit of dab of yellow there. This one's going to get a little green back of the sunflower treatment, and this one is too. So I'm just going to take a little medium yellow here, along with some yellow light, and we'll give a big stroke on there. Add a little stroke that sticks out there. Maybe make a long one there. Let's make him a wide one too. Just adding more paint as I need to fill in the shape of the petal. We'll reach way out. And I've got that nice ridge of paint there, which is beautiful. Don't need to mess with that anymore. Stroke another petal on. What I am going to do out here on these petals, I'm going to pick up some titanium white on my brush and just mix that in with some of that yellow light, creating a different shade of yellow, something a little lighter. And I'm going to add a pop of a lighter petal here and there. This is creating some difference, so it's not all the same thing everywhere. You have to have some interest and variety in your painting, and you get it by size, shape, and color of the petals. Try not to overthink what you're doing. Just, you want to paint some really jolly sunflower petals. Okay, I think I've played with those enough out there. So I'm going to just wipe my brush, and I'm going to go back to my main sunflowers here, and we're going to start to stroke those on using the medium yellow. And medium yellow is just such an intense, rich yellow color. But because these are the main flowers of the painting, I'm going to do a little bit of a variation on there so there's something different for the viewer to look at. So I'm adding some of these yellow petals on out there. I'm going to pick up some FolkArt Pure Orange, mix a little bit of that in with my medium yellow, and I'm going to create some nice orangey petals. And I'm going to put those on here and there, not everywhere. When you pick up a new color, it's fun to just start putting it on all over the place, but we want to use it strategically just to create some interest in our sunflowers so they're not all exactly yellow. Sunflowers come in so many different varieties. They have some that are almost completely orange and red. Some look very, very fuzzy with lots of small petals. Then you've got the big ones with the giant yellow petals on them. They're just all sorts of interesting varieties of sunflowers available in the marketplace today. So we're just stroking on. Now I'm going back to just more of my medium yellow, not picking up more orange, adding in some of these larger petals, adding in some skinny petals here and there. Just establishing tones mostly, getting some yellow colors on our petals. We'll come back and really brighten these up with that yellow light. But we need to put some base tone yellow here and there on our flowers. Again, try not to overthink this. Just stroke these petals on and just kind of leave them alone. We've got more dark color to add to the sunflower centers, and then we've got to come back and highlight those. So we're just getting some yellow petals on here right now. And this is the most fun part of this painting, is just this free-form stroking on of these petals. Okay, now time for more yellow light. So I'm going to put some more out on my palette. And I'm just going to mix that with my palette knife to make it a bit more creamy. And I'm just going to mix this little bit of white in there, cleaning up my palette a little bit. And make sure to clean your palette knife off so when you set it down, it's good to go for the next time you need it. And I will wipe my filbert brush off on my shop towel, pinch it between the shop towel so that it's groomed back into shape. And now we'll pick up some of the yellow light. And I'm going to pay a little bit more attention to how these petals are formed, because these are going to be the lightest, brightest petals for the most part, and I want these to look really nice and have some nice, thick texture to them. I'm going to start right here and put on a big fat petal. You can see that nice ridge of paint there. And we'll do a little skinny petal here. And then come back here with a nice big petal. It's got a nice angle to the end of it. And there you can see I've got a wide petal, an orange petal, a thin petal. There's a little orange petal back there and another fat petal. So we've got lots of variety going on. And that's what we want to achieve on all of our flowers. So you can stroke the paint on very boldly. And be sure to leave some areas where you're not putting all of this light yellow on. You want to see the other colors in your sunflower petals. And every time you paint a sunflower, it's going to look different. It's impossible to paint the same flower twice. And I just love this very, very thick paint and the way it just trails off the paintbrush and gives you these wonderful, rich, textured petals on your flowers. Can't get thick brushwork with thin paint. You have to have a paint that's very, very heavy bodied, like the pure artist pigments are. And I'm loving this great contrast that we have in that area. And I'm not really going to do much in here on this back sunflower because I'm going to make this sunflower really stand out in front of it. So by putting these lighter petals on here, I'm really setting this flower in front of this other flower. And that's how it works. Now this flower is clearly in front of this one that's back there. And because of the work that we did earlier, I've established some dark shading in there, and we also put some yellowy orange petals in there. So we've done all the work behind these petals that we need to. Just continue to add your brighter yellow petals, letting that paint trail off as it comes toward the center of the sunflower. Having some variety in the shape of the petals is important. You do not want your sunflower petals to look like wagon wheels. You need to have some interesting shapes so that it's not just a circle. And again, it's great when this paint just kind of trails away and you can see the color underneath. That's something that we are striving for. And not every stroke that you put on is going to be perfect or exactly the way you want it. It rarely is, but just kind of be happy with the textures and the shapes of the strokes that you get. Love that. That's a really nice shape stroke there. We'll see if it can happen again. May or may not. But again, I'm moving around this flower and I'm trying to make sure that there is some interest in the outside edges of these petals so that they're not all the same size or the same shape. And I know I keep repeating that, but it's very important that you think about that as you're stroking on your sunflower petals. Okay, see here we've left this palette knife mark. There's a gap between these other petals, and these seem to be spaced equally distance apart, and that's not what I want. So I'm going to come back and add another petal there. So these now don't have the same space as we have here and here, which is creating a more interesting looking sunflower. Sometimes you have to go back and really evaluate what you've done. And I'm going to take some white, some titanium white on my brush, and I'm going to just add in a couple of really bright highlights. They can go right over a petal, or they might be a little bit different shape. I'm not going to do it everywhere. I'm evaluating as I'm applying these to where they need to be. So I've skipped a few petals around there. Some have completely covered the previous stroke, and some leave a little bit of that stroke showing. And that's all I'm going to do on that flower. I don't want to continue just to paint it for painting's sake. When you've finished an area or you've finished the job, you can stop working on it. You don't have to just keep painting and painting and painting something. So we've got one more sunflower. Well, I'm going to do a little bit of additional highlighting on this other sunflower that I thought was finished, but it's not. So I'm taking some yellow light and titanium white on my brush, still using the number 10 filbert brush. No water, no floating medium, just lots of thick paint. And I'm going to add in a couple of highlighting petals here and there. So just adding some variety. Don't want this flower to look all sad because it doesn't have some pretty highlights on it. And depending on your painting, it may need more of these white highlights, it may need fewer of them. You're going to have to evaluate your own sunflower and decide where, if any place, you need to add these little highlights. So I think that's plenty on that sunflower. So I'm going to get another shop towel here so I can wipe my brush off. You need to make sure that you keep your brush in good shape and that you don't have too much paint on it. You want plenty of it to stroke on, but now I'm changing from the white highlights back to my yellow light highlight, so I needed to wipe the white off of my brush. Again, load it up so that you've got paint on the outside and you can lay on these beautiful, thick sunflower petals. Again, where this paint trails off, the end of the stroke is really, really something to strive for. It's so nice that I don't have to come back and add additional shading on each petal because we established the shadows earlier on. I'm just going to make a little point on this petal there. It's much more interesting. And once you really start putting these light petals on, this painting really does start to come to life. Everything else up to this point's just been getting ready for these really bright sunflower petals. You have to set the stage for the most important thing in your painting. So that's what we did earlier, and now all that work is paying off because we've got great contrast and we are able to create very interesting petal shapes. And we don't have to worry about completely filling in because we've already filled in with our toning of the sunflower petals that we did earlier. That's looking nice. I'm going to take some white on my brush and add a few highlights here and there. Okay, just evaluating as I'm going, looking to see if I need to put a little petal in here or there. And I'm going to stop now before I overdo. And what I am going to do, before I worry about drying the rest of the painting, I'm going to come back and I'm going to add the calyxes to these kind of sunflowers that are turned back or a bit in profile. And so I'm going to use my filbert brush and I'm picking up some yellow light and a very small amount of sap green. We're just making a very light green color. I'm actually going to pick up some of that original aqua color in here because I don't want this to be too bright. Whoa, that's way brighter than I wanted it. So I'm going to add more of my original aqua color and a little bit more white to this. So I want it to be pretty subtle. That's a little better. Okay, let's stroke some of this on. Creating the little bits of the back of the sunflower. Going to wipe my brush, pick up a little floating medium, work that in the brush, and then we're just going to soften this back a little bit. So just stroking that on, and then I'm going to create the stem that comes back to the sunflower. So I picked up a little bit of white and some yellow light on my brush, and I'm just dabbing on a little bit of a highlight. You really don't want to spend too much time on the back portions of this sunflower because it's not the focus of the painting. Everyone will know that it's the back portion of a sunflower. And I'm just softening that in. And we've got another one to paint, so I'm going to take the same color, some floating medium on my brush, and add a little bit more white and yellow light to it this time, so it's even lighter. And I'm going to, that's more like it, just paint some of this on there, dabbing out some little indications of the little leaves that are on the back of a sunflower. And once again, I'm going to create that little bit of a stem that goes into the painting. I'm going to take a little bit of sap green there, deepen this color just a little bit, not too much, and we'll add some little green dabs here and there, creating the back part of the sunflower. Again, we don't want to make this the focus of the painting. Just softening that back into a stem there. And that's all we need to do. I'm almost going to leave the other flower alone, but I can't do that as much as I want to. So I'm going to take a little bit of my original putty color, some yellow light, and a little bit of white on my brush. And I'm just going to dab a little bit of color on there, and it's almost the same color as the background, and then add a little bit of my sap green mixture to this, and that's really all that needs there. Just not going to give it too much attention. What does need some attention are the centers of the sunflower. So I'm going to take some pure orange, and I'm going to mix that with just a little bit of yellow light and a little bit of medium yellow here, just to brighten that color up a little bit, so it's now a nice light orangey color. I'm still using my number 10 filbert brush, and I'm just going to begin to kind of pat some of this brighter orange color right over the light area that we established early on in the painting of the sunflower. Not really blending this in, just dabbing some on, creating a little bit of a bright area on the sunflower center. Again, that's pure orange, yellow light, and then a bit of medium yellow to warm that color up. It's a pretty orange color, and then we'll just dab some of that on here. Take a little bit of pure orange and just dab some accents of just pure orange on here and there. Not everywhere, but just a few places, which adds a little bit of interest and variety to our sunflower centers. Then before we finish up our bright highlights, I'm going to add some darker shadows to this. So I'm going to use a little bit of sap green and asphaltum. And that's going to make a very nice dark color, and add a little burnt sienna to that. Alright, and I'm going to just begin to dab some of this very dark color on. You could see just how rich this color is. I'm just loosely dabbing this on the shadowy side of my sunflower centers. Just giving it that extra dark color to really make the sunflower centers dramatic. Do the same thing here. Again, dab, dab, dab. Just loosely adding super dark contrasting shading to the sunflower centers, giving it some drama. And it's not a matter of blending this color in, it's just dabbing the color on, creating an interesting shape. I'm not really going to add any more dark up here. I will add just a little bit of extra dark right in here, just to help create that bit of contrast here. I want that to kind of remain in the background. And then the final thing we're going to add to the painting is the final highlights in the sunflower center. So I'm going to clean my brush in water. I'm going to blot it on my shop towel. And I will pick up some medium yellow and some yellow light, creating a nice yellow color, and a little bit of titanium white to make it even brighter. And we're just going to dab on a little bit of a light highlight on our three big important sunflower centers. I'm just going to dab some of this light color on, letting it kind of trail out and soften into these petals a little bit. Just a little bit of a highlight there. We'll do the same thing over here. Dab, dab, dab. And then the last sunflower center, we're going to come over here and we're just going to dab a little bit of a light highlight on here. Let it be kind of ragged, just an interesting shape of the highlight. And I can't leave well enough alone, so I'm going to lighten this color just a little bit and come back and add a couple of little brighter spots. And there you have Tuscan Sunshine. Thanks for painting along with Tuscan Sunshine. It's a lot of fun to create those kind of runs and drips in the background, and then to use our palette knife to create that big red jug. And of course, it's always fun to create those sunflower petals using an impasto technique. Next time, we'll be painting Spring's Song. Come on everybody, let's paint.